All right, James Robilotta, man, I am beyond excited to have you here, man. I know we were talking a little bit before. I've been looking at you, seeing what you've been doing, and really looking forward to this conversation. So thank you so much for being here today.
Stu, I'm pumped that the powers of the universe somehow found us. And I'm glad that we're connected, my guy.
Absolutely. So I was wondering if to kind of kick this thing off, if you could give our audience an idea of like, what did life look like for little James as you grew up as a little kid?
Sure. Little James, I mean, I like to say I'm frequently witty, always fresh. You know what I'm saying? And that started young, Stu. That started really young. No, no, to be honest, I had a very good childhood. I grew up with more than enough. I grew up in a town called Sayville, New York. It's on Long Island, voted the friendliest town in America in 1994. Fun fact. And I was there for that too. So I'll take some credit. I shook some hands and kissed some babies during those times. So I think I brought it home for the team.
Probably a little fine, small printing under that says "Due to James."
But yeah, man, I had a good childhood. I'm very, very close with my parents. I have two older brothers. They're 9 and 11 years older than me, so that's significant. Dang. So much so that for a lot of my childhood, there's a lot of it that felt like an only child, right? Because my brothers were, off to college or starting jobs and things like that, and I was like still playing with stuffed animals. And so there was a lot there. Around middle school, high school, like many, I developed some significant self-esteem issues, and started telling myself stories that I'm still trying to shake today. Some of them, but that's the worst of what I had, man. And so I really grew up with very privileged and very fortunate. And I was a theater kid. I played some golf as well. And that was me, man.
That's cool. It's interesting to hear you say like some of those stories you're still trying to shake today. And kind of one of the things that I do with Tony Robbins, and one of the things that I've discovered working from him, is they did this study at Stanford University. And in the study, they found out that 50% of our patterns as a human, we get by the age of 5, and 95% of our patterns are developed by the time we're 18. And so it's so interesting that even you saying like, I had this more than blessed childhood that I grew up in, yet you still grabbed some of the stories that had a negative impact on your life. And it's just interesting to hear that, because I think I can relate where I grew up in a very fortunate way. But just the way the mind works as a human is sometimes, regardless of how blessed we are, we tend to like grab onto some of these stories that go, I'm not good enough, or, I'm not the person to do something amazing in life, when, at the end of the day, like you're kind of saying, they're stories. And the beautiful part seeing in your life is they're stories you can change.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny. I was meeting with my counselor yesterday. I think counseling is really important. You don't get bonus points at the end of life for doing it alone. And so big proponent of mental health work. And I was talking to my counselor, and just recently, as we were talking before we got on air here, I just recently had a baby, 6 months old. He's a cool dude. We're going to keep him so far. And I was talking to her, and we were talking about my self-esteem issues. And he was like, and she was like, it's crazy. Like, look at your son right now. Like, he doesn't think about whether he's enough, or whether he looks a certain way, or whether his arm is weird in photos, right? Like, he doesn't care about any of that kind of stuff. Like, we are born with these insane self-esteems, these super high self-esteems, but we are taught to doubt. We're taught to question. We're taught to write stories, which was really, as a new parent, was really overwhelming to hear. But as it's important to think about as well, is that that's something that we learned, and so the stats that you shared line up pretty perfectly with that.
Yeah, and especially raising your little baby, it's like those are like the things you teach them will be the things that really become staples in their life, and it's double-edged sword. But I think the right side of the sword to look at is what an incredible opportunity to shape someone's life, to build the right philosophies, the right beliefs, the right patterns into them. So when they grow up, they do have some of this almost unconscious advantages in life. Right. So I'm curious, because, obviously you are a public speaker and you speak all over the world. You do keynotes all over the place, colleges, for big companies. And one of the things that I would be curious is in working specifically, if we look at like students for a second and people kind of in that university world, I'm curious for you, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you see kind of come out as people are kind of in that world and in that phase of life?
Yeah, there's a bunch. I think one of the biggest ones is feeling like they have to have it all together, right?
Mm.
Okay, I just dropped $100,000, or my parents just dropped $100,000, $200,000, however much universities cost, especially in the United States.
Yeah.
Right, it's getting a little silly out here, but right, or I'm in the process of dropping this much money, and so I better come out knowing exactly what's going on, right? I got to feel like this is my moment. I'm paying this much money to come out with answers. When ultimately we need to recognize that, like, no, we're coming out of college with better questions, right? And I think that's one of the hardest things, is that a lot of people are like, I got to come out of here with my dream job. It's like, no, you're not coming out with your dream job. Maybe some of you will, right? Like some people certainly will, but I mean, there are very few careers that you need to pick the perfect major for right now. You know, I mean, so many, even like a lot of doctors I know majored in anthropology, right? Like a lot of lawyers that I know majored in theater. You know what I mean? Like you can kind of like, you can figure it out. And so I think that's a big thing, is that you're not looking for your dream job. Don't put that pressure on that I got to land this dream job. You're just landing your next job. Right.
Yeah.
And you're creating opportunities so that you can ask better questions, so that you can find the answers that make more sense for you. But there's so much pressure to have it all together. Right.
There is.
And that's the big thing, is that inside of that, yes, we can talk about the career angle like we were, but we can also talk about the mental health side of it as well, of like that, like I need to show everybody that I have it all together. Social media tells me that I need to have it all together. Or if I don't have it all together, it tells me that I need to talk about it in a kitschy way. So at least it's like funny and I'm laughing about it. It's like, oh my God, I'm a mess. It's like, you know what I mean? As opposed to being like, no, but actually you're a mess. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like this flippant, like, I know everybody has anxiety. Whee! It's not like, it's just like, there's those moments where it's like, yes, and let's have the conversation, right? Like college is this amazing opportunity. It's like a leadership residency. It's like a life residency. You get to try it out, but there's these bumpers still in the bowling alley where you're not going to completely fail, because there's staff, there's administration, there's still parents heavily involved, there's whatever. You got a team around you that is going to let you try. They're going to let you slip. They're going to let you fail. They're not going to let you quit. Right. And so for that reason, like, we got to try. You got to get out there. And this is the moment also, like, there's free mental health at colleges and university services. Like, how are you using some of those kinds of things? And I think those are all the biggest things that I'm noticing that a lot of people are doing, is that they're turning in instead of out. And it's not causing them to come out with realistic expectations for themselves or kindness for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think an extremely important thing to note, like you said, like there's so many free services you can access. Right. And so it's like, if someone's listening to this and maybe they are having that silly laugh of like, I have anxiety, and they're like talking about it, but not doing something about it. I think maybe this could be an incredible opportunity for anybody that's listening to this to say, all right, I'm going to do something today to go seek out free help, or to go talk to someone, right? Like, I'm doing some of my research on you. I saw you had this one shirt and it says therapy is dope. And I was like, I love that t-shirt. That's like, it's such a real thing, that if you can go out and seek help and figure out, like, what are these things inside of me doing? How can I figure those out? Like, there are people out there that have literally spent their entire life so that they could sit down with you and help you figure that out.
Yeah. Right. Particularly for us as men, right, Stu? Like, men are taught to be internal processors. You don't present me with your process. You present me with a product, right? Like, I don't want to hear about the complaints. I want to hear about your solutions, right? We're told that as men over and over again. So it's like, stuff it into the lump of your throat, get it together, Rick, and come to me when you're a gosh darn man, right? Like, it's just the way that we talk about men not being able to express stuff to each other is really unhealthy.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I was just having a conversation with my girlfriend last night, and we were talking about, just conversations that I have with my guy friends. And we were talking about this exact thing where I was like, yeah, we just like don't talk about those things with some of my best friends. And I was like, even my brother, like, we don't even talk about those things. But it's such an important thing to make sure that you are having those conversations, whether it's with, family, friends, or someone, again, that really can help you with that. And so I guess one thing I would be curious is, you work with all these people, you see all these different things that they're facing, challenges, struggles. I'm assuming that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming in all these talks you do, you're interacting with all these students, there's probably a handful of people that come up to you and go, how the heck, like, what the heck am I supposed to do? How do I figure this thing out called my life? And I would be curious, is there a common piece of advice or something that you continuously go to, that when someone comes to you and says, I'm trying to figure out my life, what would you recommend I do? Is there a common piece of advice that you're constantly giving
them? Is there a common piece? Not necessarily a common piece of advice. I am, this is maybe a little cheesy, but it's okay. Cheese is a delicious product, so whatever. But I think giving advice is lazy, whereas asking questions is harder, but is more effective, right? Seeing opportunities as a coach, as opposed to as like a wise old sage, right? And so whenever anybody comes up to me, I'm like, what's one more question I can ask? And so I think trying to dive into, what are the stories they're telling themselves, what are the patterns that they're in, which something I know that you're passionate about as well. And so I think there's a little bit of that in those conversations. I think a big thing for me that I try to teach is something that I also need to practice, which is grace. Like, where have you given yourself grace this week, today, this month, this year? Even in this pandemic, like, we're kind of coming out on the other side of this pandemic, and I'm like, I didn't do enough, right? Like, now I'm getting back on the road, and now I go to these flights and all these things. I got this kid, like, I should have gotten that book done. I should have gotten this done. It's like, bro, you good, right? Like, you did what you needed to do to survive in a pandemic, right? Like, and it's not like you didn't do anything. And so it's interesting. I think a lot of speakers teach often what they need to hear or what they recently learned. And so grace is what I talk a lot about, because it's something that I need to be reminded about. Inside of myself, I feel like I have these two warriors, and one is legacy and the other one is presence. And I wish I could tell you that presence wins more than legacy, because presence means I'm in the moment. I'm here. I'm experiencing it, right? The journey is more important than the destination, right? Like that kind of stuff. Yeah. I get it. I see it. I think it's beautiful. I don't want to miss these moments with my son, right? But at the same time, I'm like, what's going to be said in my eulogy? What are you doing right now? How are you making every single day matter? How are you impacting lives? How are you, like that kind of stuff, right? And so I'm living towards legacy, and I'm missing this moment. And so a lot of times what I talk to those students about is like, how are you enjoying right now? Right? Like, this is college. Go be dumb. Go try stuff. Like, this is it, right? Like, these are your 4 or 5 years. If you're like me, I took a victory lap, no shame. And so like, this is it, right? You got to smoke it while you got it. Like, this is your chance to try to just experiment, to see what you like, right? Like, get a whole bunch of different internships, join a whole bunch of different organizations, go to random clubs where nobody looks like you, and just sit down and listen, right? I think those are the big things that I'm trying to tell some of these individuals, right? Like, I have a Bachelor of Science in Marine Biology. Yeah. Right. And I'm a professional speaker. My 5 years of college and mediocre GPA have now been boiled down to an 18-second bit in every speech that I give. Right. Like, that's what I use my degree for. That and to impress dates at aquariums. But that's it though. You know what I mean? But yet I figured it out. So I think some of that is like, how are you giving yourself grace right now? And how are you just taking advantage of what's around you?
Yeah. Grace is such a important thing. It's like, sometimes we just got to take a deep breath and go, it's going to all be all right. It's like, I was just talking to someone on the podcast, I believe it was last week. And one of the things we were talking about is that, like, it's funny how when you start to look back on your life, you always start to connect the dots. So you go, well, that's why I did this thing, or that's why that thing happened. And it's like, if you can just start to realize now that the thing you're doing will, in the future, you'll look back at it and you go, that's why it happened. You can enjoy today so much more than having to worry and stress and freak out if you're doing the right thing or in the right place, because ultimately all the dots, they connect themselves at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
yeah, 100%.
Can you explain your philosophy on the word should? Because I heard this in some of the research I was doing on you and kind of how you talk to people about the word should. And I was just wondering if you could shed light on that, because I just thought it was so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, we are exceptional storytellers as humans. Right? Like we know this, right? I mean, the man that you work for, Tony Robbins, iconic storyteller, right? You're an iconic storyteller as a speaker as well yourself. Our buddy Antonio Neves, iconic story. Like we are great storytellers. But what are the stories that you're telling yourself, right? Because we're also good storytellers then too. Even though we don't, maybe it doesn't always help us, right? Yeah. But like we believe a lot of these stories that we tell ourselves. And so, you brought up a powerful word earlier of like not thinking we're enough, right? I'm not cool enough, smart enough, hot enough, rich enough, successful enough. My car isn't this enough. My career isn't that enough, whatever it is, right? Those are stories, lies that we tell ourselves. Other stories that we tell ourselves are when we see somebody doing something, we're like, oh, I should. We see this and we're like, oh, I should. Oh, let me do this, so I should. Let me do that, or I should, right? Like, especially in our field, you see someone with a really cool virtual setup at home, you're like, oh, God, I should. Or you see somebody who delivers something a certain way, oh, I should. Oh, they're funnier than me, so I should. Oh, they're this than me, so I should, right? Like those kinds of things where we're constantly shoulding on ourselves. Right? And no one's winning. But we're out here like should equals shame. Right? Should implies I haven't done it yet and I've failed until I've done it. Right? Which is it sounds like a big leap, but in a way it kind of is that. It's a little twist to the knife. Right? It's like, yeah, you're not where you're supposed to be yet, bro. Let me remind you of that by saying the word should. And so I know I'm not a huge New Year's resolution person. I actually think I reflect more on like on my birthday typically. I'm like, hey, how was this year? Or something like that. But either way, I recently made a goal this past year to not, 2 years ago, just take the word should out of my vocabulary. And so I'm now trying to replace should with either just saying, yeah, no, I haven't done that. Or yeah, I didn't get around to it. It didn't happen. Right. Or I'm planning on doing that. Right. Like, yeah, I want to do that by this day, like trying to set some action to it or giving myself the grace. So many people create to-do lists every single day when half of the to-do list is half the list that you didn't get done yesterday and it just keeps getting moved over day to day. Yeah, that's totally. Shame. That is that we are keeping those things on our to-do list because of shame, not for any other reason.
One thing too that I know you touched on, which I just again thought was so beautiful, is almost replacing the word should with like want when we're in this discovery part of our life, right? It's like, I should do this because my parents want me to go down that path, or I should do this because, again, all my friends are doing this, so I need to keep up with the Jones, right? But it's like, at the end of the day, if you switch the question to I should do this to I want to do and then fill in the blank, I think it gives you such clarity on what you really want. Like one of the processes I do when I work with people is we ask the question, what do you really want? But then we ask it 3 or 4 or 5 times, because it's like, you maybe ask yourself originally, what do I really want in my life? And you go, well, XYZ, whatever it is, I want the nice car. And you go, well, why do I really want that? And it's like, if you boil this down enough, you get to that similar question of, instead of what should I do? What do I want? And that brings so much clarity.
So much clarity. It also makes you say something out loud. And then you either realize, did I like the way that tasted coming out, or did I not? Because maybe I don't want that. Yeah. Right? Like maybe I just think I should want that because that's what everybody else is doing. But then I said it out loud and I was like, wait a minute, maybe that's not me. Right. Or if you say it out loud and you're like, oh, that felt good. Right. That's a sign. Yeah. Like you see that with the individuals that you work with and coach, right? You watch the light flip on when someone says something that they want. You can see like their voice gets a little bit higher. They can start talking a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, we're getting there.
Exactly. It's so interesting too. This thought I was having the other day, because before I worked with Tony Robbins, I used to work at Vans for a little bit. And when I worked there, I eventually could have gone into like kind of like the sales world in that company, and been in like the leadership team and kind of done some stuff in there. And it's so interesting that I think sometimes we try to build a life of, if I did this, it would look really cool, right? Like if I was going around and going, yeah, I work at Vans, I work at the corporate and this, that, and the other, it's like that may sound really cool, but to me, like, is that what really lights my soul up? Because it's like, if we really think about it, we live in an abundant world, and you can make anything happen that you truly want to. But the thing is, if you're going to put energy into do something because you think people will think it looks cool, and then get to that place and not be fulfilled or not really be happy, why not put that same energy and go, I could do this thing and it could look great and people could say, hey, great job. Why not put that energy into what I really want to do? And I'm still going to have to work. Everything in life you got to work for. You're going to have to put the time in, the energy. But then maybe once you end up there, you go, I don't really care if people think this looks cool or not, because I'm happy, because I'm fulfilled. Like, I think that's the place that we really want to get to. It's accepting our life and being happy with our life ourselves, rather than trying to do it for somebody else.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's hard because like we can like see Facebook, we can see Google and what it would be like to work at someone. We could see Vans, we could see Nike, we could see, what I'm saying? Like some of these sexy companies, it's like, well, that's what I want to do. And I got to work there. Right. It's so interesting how, if I could tell a quick story, I mentioned that I wanted to do I got my Bachelor of Science in Marine Biology. When I was growing up and just like watching TV at home with my parents, we used to watch Jacques Cousteau. And Jacques Cousteau is this old school marine biologist. He was the first person to have a show where he brought cameras under the water and showed people and taught people about the fishes in the sea. And I remember my mind was blown. I was like, oh, that's under there. That's incredible. I want to do that. What I want to do is I really want to have a show where I can get on there and teach people in an entertaining way about something that I'm passionate about. And at the time I was like, marine biology. And so in choosing to go to school and university, I was like, all right, I'm either going to go for marine biology or I'm going to go for theater. And I was like, you know what, if I'm good at theater and I put myself in the right place, theater will always be available to me. So let me get a concrete degree, because that'll be good, right? I should get a degree that I can fall back on. And so halfway through my collegiate career, junior year, my teachers are like, you're putting a lot of jokes in your scientific papers, James. I don't know if this is for you. And I was like, you know what? I think you're right. Right. And like, but I finished the degree because I was almost done with it anyway. But then I was like, oh, shoot, I don't want to do marine biology. At least because marine biology, what it actually is research. What it actually is writing papers. It's not getting your own TV show, right? That's not what it is. Not everybody's a dolphin trainer, or whatnot. It's people are doing water quality sampling. Those are marine biologists. And I was like, that's terrible. And so. So it's funny because if you now fast forward to what I'm doing now, I worked in higher education for a while after college. You got a master's in counseling and stuff like that. But like, if you now fast forward to the career that I've built as a speaker, I'm now getting on stages and educating people in an entertaining way about something that I'm passionate about. And so just like what you were talking about, we see it as Vans. Vans is the goal. The big label is the goal. That's the way we assume we need to scratch the itch. But there's a lot of other ways to scratch the itch. It's just that this marketing has told us and put it in front of our face that this is the only way you can get to what you actually want to get to. You know what I mean? And so like, totally. I'm now getting that itch scratched in a completely different way that never even crossed my mind when I was younger. Because I thought I wanted to be a marine biologist, when what I actually wanted was to impact individuals in an entertaining way, right? And so
full circle.
It's kind of crazy.
And hopefully you still get to swim with the fishies at some point.
Sure, I got my scuba license, so we out here.
Okay, me too. It is unbelievable under the water, but maybe one day you'll get the TV show. I'll keep looking out.
I got dreams, brother. We working towards it. We working towards it.
Absolutely. ABC Discovery, they don't even know what's coming. So let's talk about this then. So you get marine biology, you kind of come out of school going, this isn't really what I want. How does public speaking, how did that become a thing? Like, how did you one day turn into Mr. Travel in the World, speaking on stages in front of thousands of people?
Yeah. So I was a highly involved student leader. I was an RA and super involved on campus and joined a historically Black fraternity. I had a positive experience where I'm still involved in that today, and just fell in love with student leadership and really enjoyed all of that. And so as marine biology, the dream was really kind of disintegrating in front of my eyes, along with my GPA. I had a supervisor at the time when I was an RA who was like, hey, I know you're trying to figure your life out, but why don't you go and work at a college or university? You can supervise a team of RAs and just go work in student affairs, higher education for a little while. Worst comes to worst, if you don't love it, you're working at an institution where you can get a master's in what you actually want to do for free, and you can just figure it out. And so that's what I did. I wound up going to graduate school for counseling with an emphasis in higher education, because working with college students is incredible. And I do a lot of stuff in the corporate world as well, but I first got involved as a speaker in the college world, but because that's where I was working. But in college, you learn why you are who you are. I think in high school, you learn who you are, but in college, you learn why you are who you are. And that's such a really cool time to work with individuals when they're asking themselves the question of why. Right? It's also like why a lot of my coaching clients are also in their early 20s and stuff like that, because that's a moment where people are still asking themselves the question of why. Why does this matter to me? Why do I want to do this? And those kinds of cool questions. And so I saw it as an opportunity. So I worked in higher education and supervising student leaders for a number of years and taking them to conferences. And at those conferences, there was opportunities for people to present programs and just kind of share knowledge, pass on best practices. And so I started doing that for fun because I like being in the front of rooms. And somebody came up to me after a couple of years and randomly at one of these conferences and was like, hey, this may be a personal question, but we have an event at our school next year, and I think you could be great for it. Do you mind if I ask what you charge? And I politely looked at this man and I said, I'm very sorry, sir. I don't know who the hell you're talking to right now. I was like, I don't charge for this. I'm nothing, right? Like you can buy me a sandwich if you feel like you need to buy me something. And that's when I realized, though, that maybe I'm more than just a professional here, a professional in the field of higher ed, just kind of sharing some ideas. Maybe I got something cooler here or something bigger. And so that's when I started to pursue it, told my friends, hey, I got some cool ideas that I've been sharing for some other groups. And I'd love to come and share it at some of your schools if you're interested. And it started as a side hustle where I wasn't making any money. And so maybe I was the one being hustled. But I just didn't think I was good enough. I think my story was good enough. Who wants to listen to some privileged white boy who was homesick in college, cry about his problems, right? It's like, get over yourself, dude. But then I realized that there's a lot of relatability in some of that. So that's kind of how I built the career up.
I love that. I'm curious if you could go back to getting into like the college speaking circuit and kind of really getting into that world. Is there any piece of advice you would give yourself as you were kind of in that, even pre getting into it, and then the first and second year in it? Like if you could go back to James at that point and go, James, you need to know this one or two things. Is there anything that comes to mind there?
Anything that comes to mind as far as getting into the speaking business at that? Yeah. Okay, great. Just want to make sure I heard you correctly. I think first off, your story is good enough. Right? Like your story is good enough. There's a big thing where all the professional speakers that I had seen up until that point in my life that had come to my high school or even some people that came to college were all individuals who grew up very, very differently than I did. They had been through some stuff, or they had killed friends in drunk driving accidents, or they had, I never saw myself in any of them. And so they were really hard stories to listen to and great speakers to listen to, but I didn't see myself in any of them. And so none of their messages stuck. Like I can't even tell you the name of one of those speakers that I saw right now. And that's one of the reasons why I thought I could never be a speaker. Like I mentioned, I was like, no one wants to hear your story, dude. You haven't been through anything. What's the matter? Did your silver spoon cut your gums on the way out of your mouth? Right? You know what I mean? Like, so at the time, I think it was recognizing that, like, no, we all have a story that's going to resonate with somebody. It's figuring out, what are you passionate about, and who needs to hear what you're passionate about, and why do they need to hear it from you? Right. And because who knows? I mean, who needs to hear what you're passionate about? It could be anybody, right? It could be veterans, could be women, could be underrepresented populations. It could be college students. It could be whoever, right? But then why do they need to hear from you? It's because you have a story, you have an angle. And I use humor for a lot of my talks. Like my speaking style is I get you laughing, and then I sucker punch you in the feels, right? And like that's my whole style. But so I think as far as getting started, it's having the confidence to know that your story is going to resonate with somebody. You just need to keep practicing telling it. And by practicing telling it, I'm not talking about the mirror. I'm talking about get yourself in front of some audiences, do it for free, get some reps, listen to some feedback, and keep pushing.
Yeah. And what would you say? Because I mean, now you've been doing this for years. What would you say is something that you are consistently doing to stay more prominent in the speaking world?
I mean, besides being ridiculously attractive, I can't think of anything. No.
That's the key.
Oh gosh, I wish my self-esteem was that high. What is something that I'm consistently doing? I mean, I'm still a student, right? Like I'm still like, I watch TED Talks. I love commencement season, right? Like watching commencement season, watching Goalcast, watching Eric Thomas, watching Tony Robbins, watching, some of these folks, Les Brown, right? I'm a member of the National Speakers Association, right? I'm going to pay the money. I'm going to go to Influence, their annual conference, and I'm going to learn from some of those folks. So I think some of those things are big. I'm also a part of a speakers mastermind that's all around storytelling. And so every other week we meet for an hour and a half. There's 5 of us in the group. We pick a topic, and the topic could be something random like, I don't know, sandwiches, or it could be something like fear, right? Like literally across the board. And each week we have to come with a 10-minute story prepared, and we practice storytelling, right? So like,
that's awesome.
So that kind of stuff is some things that I'm working on. I think also it's sharpening the blade of some of my more popular keynotes, while at the same time thinking about, what else could I talk about? What else matters to me right now, or to the audiences that I'm trying to get into, right? Like I mentioned, I'm doing more and more corporate speaking. So a lot of my stories were from times where I was a college student leader. That's not going to work, bro. Right? You got to mine for some different stories that are going to resonate with the new audience.
Totally.
And so stuff like that.
Love it. Well, James, I'm curious. I mean, obviously you're a wealth of knowledge, doing so much in the world, and just make it really just like a beautiful impact. I would be curious, if people want to get more info on you and see what you're up to, where's the best place to find you, see what you're up to?
Yeah, brother. Stu, this has been special, man. Great question asker. It's been really cool hanging out with you, man. Just in case you're one of those podcast hosts that like cut people off at the end and don't let them compliment you. So I'm gonna get that in there right now.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
But yeah, I'm James T. Robo, R-O-B-O, all over the internet. James T. Robo on Instagram and other social media sites. And I'm JamesTRobo.com. I also run a podcast called Diner Talks with James. I'm trying to recreate those late night conversations that you have with friends that you never want to leave over the food that you probably shouldn't be eating. Those late night they're always deep and they're always hysterical conversations. I'm trying to recreate some of those on Diner Talks with James. And so that's been a fun project that I've been on. We should get you on there, Stu. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, man, that's where you can find me.
Absolutely. And we'll put all that in the show notes as well, so everybody's got all of that there. one last question I have for you, because we're all about helping people find direction here, but we want to do it through action. And so what I would be curious for you is, what would you say is one thing someone listening to this can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction in their life?
It's one thing people can do in the next 24 hours to find direction in their life. If you want, one thing you can do is take a blank piece of paper. And as you are thinking about what you want to do with your life, I want you to make a list of all the potential things that are kind of in that realm. And it could just like make a list of potential careers and things like that, and just start writing them down, right? Chef, professional golfer, sassafras artist. I don't know what that is, but you know what I mean? Like professional barista, doctor, or whatever. Just like write down a whole bunch of different careers or companies or something like that. And I want you to pay attention. I want you to pay attention to which ones did you write down that after you wrote it down, your brain started going somewhere. Mm-hmm. Right? Because those are sometimes, it's our brain being like, oh, let's dream about that for a second. Right? Like, where are the places where we're just like, hey, I'm just banging out a list real quick, but our mind takes us somewhere. That's the one way to start, maybe just, I don't know, just trying to see what is potentially out there. And then I would also do exactly what you're doing right here, Stu, which is just ask some questions. Who is somebody that you respect and that you love and that you would take feedback from them, right? And just be like, hey, is there ever anything that you saw me potentially doing? Is there something that you saw, like based on my talents that I have or strengths, were you ever like, oh, I bet they'd be pretty good at blank? And take those with a grain of salt, but just add them to that list that we were talking about before and just see if your brain wanders. And if they don't, hey, thanks for the recommendation, Uncle Bill. Not going to listen to you, but I appreciate your time, right? It's okay. It's your life, not theirs. It's your stories, not theirs. So
true. Amazing. Well, James, again, man, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. This has been an honor. I'm looking forward to having more conversations on your podcast soon. And just, again, thank you so much for being here. Massively, massively appreciate you, brother.
Hell yeah. Stu, thank you so much, man. You run a great show. It's an honor to be a part of it.
Thank you, man.